Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Get Printing. I'm your host, Zach Dewhurst, the Business Development Manager at DecoNetwork. I'm also the owner of PrintPhase, a screen print and DTF heat transfer supply company. The year after I started my business in 2009, I signed up for the game-changing software DecoNetwork. And in all my years in the decoration industry, one thing that I've learned is that there's a lot of different types of embroidery variables and different types of stabilizer backings. And it's not always obvious which one to use based on the type of material we're sewing on or the design itself. So, do you ever ask yourself, am I using the right embroidery backing for my jobs? Well, today we're thrilled to have Nancy Minnie, the product marketing manager at Madeira, USA. Nancy has been with Madeira all the way since 2000. So Nancy has a wide range of knowledge when it comes to everything embroidery, and we're going to tap into that backing stabilizer knowledge today. Nancy also happens to be obsessed with coffee and coffee cups, and it is an extension collection of coffee cups and picks them to match her attire when she goes into work. She's a character. We are really happy to have Nancy today, and we're going to have a lot of fun talking about embroidery stabilizers, whether it be backing or topping. But before we jump into today's episode, it is important that we recognize our sponsor, DecoNetwork, the all-in-one print shop automation software. Are you ever tired of juggling multiple different types of platforms to manage your decoration business? DecoNetwork is here to transform the way you manage your decoration shop. With DecoNetwork, you can effortlessly organize production, integrate with suppliers, manage your orders, and sell online all on one platform. No more headaches or paying for multiple software subscriptions. DecoNetwork streamlines your workflow from order management to artwork approval, production workflows, and shipping. Plus, with its powerful e-commerce capabilities, you can create a beautiful store in minutes using the drag and drop what you see, what you get editor. Now, it's time to take your business to the next level. Visit DecoNetwork.com and request your free demo today. DecoNetwork, the print shop automation software to organize production and sell online. Now, let's get back to the show. How's it going, Nancy?
Oh, going great. It's a Friday, so kind of in the afternoon, so I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Yeah, a few more hours left in the week, and it's all said and done for the week, and let's work for another hour. How about that?
Sounds good to me. Sorry, you West Coast people, you're probably working a little longer, but yeah, it's all good.
So today we are talking about embroidery backing. You have been with Madeira for what, 24 years now?
Yes, coming up this month, actually.
Wow.
24 years, yeah.
So 24 years, you've seen it all, and you're the expert when it comes to all things backing, topping, really anything that Madeira offers, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, certainly in 24 years, I've learned a little about embroidery. I do embroidery, I learn all the products, I know all the products, and backing is probably my favorite because I've been doing it for the longest time. So I wouldn't say that I know the most about backing, but it's just something that, I've always kind of been on top of here when it comes to the products here at Madeira, USA.
Well, so. Madeira is the leader. I don't care if, you're part of Madeira, USA, but I talk with a lot of DecoNetwork users across the entire world. I don't care where you're located in the world. Madeira is by far the most popular brand of embroidery thread. It is the most popular type of backing. Madeira has that market share more than any screen print supply consumable would have. So Madeira, it's loved by the industry. So we know you guys make the best, but you also come up, again, like I said, this little sample pack, we have so many different types of backing. And when you're first getting started, it can be confusing. Which one do I use, and how is it affecting the durability or the initial stitch quality and so forth? So excited to have this conversation with you, talking about embroidery backing. Hopefully our users are able to then apply some of this knowledge and improve their embroidery. So let's start off with, why is backing important?
So I'm excited to be here as well. Thank you again, Zach, for bringing me in again. So why is backing important? Well, it's also called stabilizer. So when I do talk about backing, I talk about backing and stabilizer because they are the same thing, just different people call them different things. But I love to say backing is where it goes and stabilizer is what it does. So it's so important to know that because it's, yes, we call it backing, especially in the commercial industry when it comes to this product. More so on the retail side, you're going to hear a lot of stabilizer. But it doesn't matter what you call it. It really is the same thing. Very similar to even interlinings that are on the retail side and things like that. But stabilizing is what it does. And that's probably the more important thing about it, for sure, because if you embroider certain garments, or most garments, I should say, if you embroider without a stabilizer, your design has no support system. So just like your underlay is kind of the foundation of a design, the stabilizer supports that foundation. So it's like the first part of, the foundation would be your stabilizer. So if you didn't use stabilizer, your design might look okay when you first embroider it, but the first time you wash it and dry it, it's going to come out all kind of in a little ball. It's going to shrink up. So we'll get into some more details about that, but that's why you need to use stabilizer.
I mean, it stabilizes the stitches. It kind of is right in the name. Like I said, backing is one location of where it could be. Backing as in on the other side versus topping, in which we're going to sew over the topping on the top side.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
topping and backing are both different types of stabilizers. Sometimes we might use both on a job. So I know that there are several different, weights and types. But can you break down for us, like, the four that Madeira really, you have cutaway, tear away, wash away, heat away. What, in a nutshell, what are those four different types and when do we use them?
So Zach, those four words describe how the backing is removed. So you're either going to use scissors to cut it away, you're just simply going to tear it away, or you can wash it away with water, or you can heat it away with heat. So a heat gun, heat press, we're talking about films and things like that. So the backings simply break down into how they're removed.
Okay. So how they're removed, but there are, you don't typically use a tearaway on a polo. You don't typically use a cutaway on a hat. So, how you remove them, yes, those are the different types, but what types of products are used for each type?
Good question. So when you're choosing a backing, if you just think about your basic cutaways, your basic tearaways, you just mentioned them, Zach, because those are the most common ones that people are going to pick from. Once you get into your toppings and your other ones, they get a little more specialties. So if we just focus on tearaways and cutaways, your tearaway, all tearaways wash away eventually. So every time you put it in the launder, you wash it, you dry it, it's going to dissipate, it's going to get softer over time, so it's going to go away. So if you're embroidering with a tearaway, the fabric that you're embroidering on has to be able to support the design. And so think about your fabrics like denim, canvas, your tote bags and things like that. Tearaway's perfect. You're not wearing it against your skin, so you don't have that kind of scratchiness against your skin. On the other side of that is our cutaway. Cutaways do not wash away. Quality cutaway is going to stay throughout the life of the garment. So your stretchy, unstable fabrics, your t-shirts, your polos, your hoodies, anything that's knit and it's going to stretch, or if it's a lightweight woven, so a lightweight dress shirt, and something within that range, you want to use a cutaway because those fabrics are just simply not as stable. So cutaway. There is a saying out there that a lot of people say, if you're going to wear it, don't tear it. That's a really good way to think about that.
Don't tear it.
That's right. And you don't want that tearaway touching your skin. So your cutaways are so much softer, and they feel good against the skin.
And I've bought retail products and immediately, I order them online now that I know. And I got that hoodie, it was a Black Friday deal and it had a collegiate, my university across it. And I look at it for the first time. It's like, man, they don't have any backing in here. That's amazing. Then you wash it. It's like, dang, like I wish it had backing. And like you said, the tearaway is a lot rougher of a feel than a wash away or cutaway is a lot softer typically. So, in my shop, we primarily use tearaway on hats. We're not doing a lot of denim and so forth, but because that's so structured, I totally get that. And then polos, most of our jackets that we do, or the knits, the button downs, all of that is essentially cutaway. Now, when it comes to, so let's focus on the cutaway, because I think that is what most shops are using if they're not doing on a hat, that you're primarily working with cutaway. Absolutely. And when it comes to cutaway, there's a lot of different types. There really are, different weaves, the way that they're actually manufactured, and they come in a lot of different weights as well. So before we talk about them, let's start with what determines the type of cutaway. What variables are we looking at to determine the right type of cutaway backing stabilizer?
Sure. So I like to break the cutaway backings down into basic cutaways, and those are the cutaway backings that have been around for years. We've seen them, we've all used them. They're white, they're non-woven. Sometimes you can see some fibers in there. And as long as it's not too lightweight, if you go with like a 1.5 basic cutaway, you can actually tear it away. So you don't want to be using that on something really heavy duty. But those are great. Those are all around great embroidery stabilizers, backings to use. And when it comes, and those are the ones that typically come in like a lightweight, medium weight, and heavyweight. And when you look at just the basic cutaways, the weights are typically around 2 ounce, 2.5 ounce, 3 ounce. That's your light, your medium, and heavyweight. So think about now when it comes to the design itself, that's when you have to look at the weight of a backing. So that 2 ounce is going to be great for your smaller designs, maybe your corporate logos, maybe just smaller designs that are open and airy. That weight's going to work out fine. 2.5 is right in the middle, so it's a great product to just have on hand anyways because you can double it. 5 ounces is kind of a lot. But there are some areas where, you might need that on a really heavy-duty pullover hoodie type thing. And then you got your 3 ounce. So when you're looking at your designs, it's like, is your design this big? Is it this big? Or is this big? Is there a lot of density in that design? So it could be this big, but all density, all stitching. Or it could be this big with the same amount of stitches, but it has open areas in it. So it's not as dense and tough on the fabric. So that's where you want to go with your lighter weights or your heavier weights. Think about the design itself.
The more dense the stitches are, the lighter or heavier we want to go.
The heavier. So you need the more stitches, the more density, the heavier the weight.
Okay. And like you mentioned, 2 to 3 ounces. I know at one point you had a 1.5 ounce.
Yeah.
Let's say that I need, is there any difference between taking 2 1.5 ounce backing stabilizer versus using one sheet of 3 ounce? Is there really any difference there?
Probably only in that now you have 2 layers of backing. And if you can embroider with one, that's really your goal is you want to do that. But if you don't have that 3 ounce, then certainly you can use 2 1.5 ounces. Or 2 ounces, just to get a little more weight. A lot of businesses will treat it that way. So I'm going to buy the lighter weight, and if I have to double, I'll double. That way they don't have to carry 2 different weights. And, it's a little more economical.
Well, okay, so let's back up. Why would it be better to have fewer layers of backing? What is the advantage or what is the disadvantage of having multiple layers?
Sure. So every time you add a layer and you go to hoop, you have, I guess, room for movement that could jeopardize the design and how the design stitches out. So maybe you don't get quite as good registration. Things don't align as well. So hooping itself is pretty challenging, especially when you're new. So just having that one layer is a little better.
But if you have magnetic
everything.
hoops, right, it's not as big of a deal. Is that fair?
With the magnetic ones, yeah. I mean, those are great.
I'll tell
so
you.
well.
Anybody
I've
out
heard-
there who's like, oh, those magnetic hoops are expensive. I'm telling you, they're worth every single penny.
Exactly.
And whoever's doing the job is going to love it. And you're going to be so much more consistent a lot of the times with your placement.
Absolutely.
There's wants and there's needs. And to me, that magnetic hoop is an absolute need if you're
Yes.
embroidering.
I'm even seeing the magnetic hoops showing up with the home machines as well. So, I mean, for it to go that direction, yeah. I mean, I've heard companies say that's all I use. I would never use, the old.
I have not turned a screwdriver. We haven't done that in my shop in a while. I mean, once you go that route, it's a no-brainer. It's expensive. But also for those who are like looking to purchase an embroidery machine, most embroidery machine resellers, they will, if you tell them ahead of time, I want magnetic hoops, they'll credit your traditional hoops so that you can get the magnetic, because at the end of the day, they want you to be happy. And if you're frustrated with the hooping portion and then you're like, this machine's not working, it has nothing to do with the machine. It's the hooping portion, which is, one of the more labor-intensive parts of this process. So fewer is always better, but again, we need the stability. The design itself, though, is what's really determining how much backing we're using. What about the material thickness? Does that have anything to do with how much stabilizer is being used?
It can, and then that's actually a good point as far as like talking about the material. A thin polyester performance wear shirt, very stretchy, very slippery to hoop, great for those magnetic hoops. But now you have to actually talk about what is the limitations of the fabric. So if you have if the heavier the fabric, a super heavy hoodie, you can easily probably use a 2-ounce, even on a heavier design, bigger,
Yep.
more dense. So I think I kind of went around the circle there, but lightweight. So we really should transition into the more specialty type cutaways when it comes to, when would we go super light? When does, it change over from a basic cutaway over to the more specialty type that are out there?
And let's start, over the years, the different shirts come out. One thing I find very interesting, Nancy, is in a given year, I'll work with hundreds of shops showing them how to use DecoNetwork, and half the shops I talk to say, yeah, I embroider t-shirts. Why wouldn't I? I can. The other half are like, no, I have no interest in doing it. And again, a t-shirt is a very different type of kind of material than your average polo. So for years, it was always that heavier cotton polo. Now we've taken a polyester t-shirt a lot of the times, which, not as easy. And it's so thin and it's so stretchy that you don't want to just always be using this basic stabilizer, which is, again, a great to have. But then you have performance stabilizers. We also, let's see, what are your most popular types of specialty, near non-basic?
You got it. Those performance wear ones, that's probably the most commonly recommended and used, as people, I think, tend to move away from just a basic cutaway. Using that Weblon no-show, the cut performance are your two top.
This is like all we
specialty.
use now. It's more expensive. I get it, and but in the grand scheme of things, is embroidery really expensive? It's actually extremely cheap material costs. I haven't done the math recently, but I have to have twice as much cost in backing as I do thread. And that's not to like say backing is crazy expensive. That's just how cheap these consumables are. So why not use the best to get the best possible outcome and keep the customer happy? Because customers don't like backing. They don't like stabilizer. They don't like seeing it. They'd prefer there's nothing there. But then then after they wash it, they're going to be like, okay, I wish I had it. So the Nomad or the Weblon No-Show, this is a really cool type of backing, but it's very, it's different. Like you said, I can see when you compare it to the basic, basic, like you said, feels like, I don't know, cotton practically versus.
It's a non-woven.
It's a non-woven versus
it's
the Weblon
kind of fluffy, so it has some loft to it. Are you able to hold that Weblon No-Show right up to the camera so we can see the?
Yeah, you can really see how you can see through it.
Yep. So you're going to see this. Lots of companies carry this product. It is super. I've been here for 24 years. It has been here for 24 years. It didn't gain in popularity until the performance wear. So the Under Armour, the Nike that came out with that performance wear fabric that everybody loves to wear, but embroiderers hate to embroider on because they don't understand it and they don't know what to use. That Weblon, that's your go-to product for that. And that's where it gained popularity for that. But that also transfers over to your T-shirts. Again, that lightweight woven dress shirts, because it's just so thin, that Weblon works perfectly with it. I do pair it with a tearaway on the very bottom. Actually, I'll get back to that, but I also want to talk about the strength of this Weblon. You were comparing the two, and it's a 1.5 ounce, which you say, oh my God, that's way too light to use. But the way that it's manufactured is it's not a non-woven in the way the basics are made. I say it gives you the stability characteristics of a 3 ounce.
I can't tear this apart. I'm a weak person, but I'll tell you, Nancy, it's so strong compared. And those thinner materials, not only do we need that extra stability, but think about a thin, you don't want the customer to be wearing it, and then you see behind it a box, the rectangle of where the backing is. Okay. And that and especially if you're going like on a white dress shirt or something like that, it turns the customer off. And that's why I really like the Weblon No-Show. Is there any problem using this on a piqué polo or anything like that? Do you see any issue? You're just spending a little bit more money.
No, I see an advantage to using it on the polos, whether it's the piqué, the cotton, knits. It's no matter what it is, it's stretchy and it's a little bit slippery too, or just more challenging to hoop, especially with the tube of the hoops. But this is probably the one product that I will highly recommend doubling because it is so thin.
We use two every single job.
And I put a medium tearaway, nice crisp tearaway on the very bottom, because you'll notice and the reason why I put it on the bottom is so that you can tear it away and it's all gone, right? And then you trim your Weblon No-Show around the design itself. The first wash is going to pretty much dissipate any tearaway that's kind of left over. But I love the way it grabs with the tubular hoop. So when you go to hoop, the Weblon is a little bit slippery as well. So with the magnetic hoops, probably a little bit easier to do. But if you're doing the tubulars, when you're pushing in, it grabs the edges of the hoop. And it makes hooping so much easier. And I'll very often even use a spray adhesive in between the three backings, I should say. I try never to use a spray adhesive on a garment if I can help it. Because if you don't have to put it on there, there's not going to be any residual. Because it's always the one that you didn't test that, the adhesive sticks to it. How do I get it off? So I try to avoid that at all costs. I always, if I am spraying it on it and putting it on the garment, you want to spray it on the backing, not the garment. And then you have less chance of it staying, which, it shouldn't, but you never know. Every fabric is a little bit different. So
Because
that's my internally, that is the special recipe, and it works for probably 80, depending on what you're doing in your shop, but 80 to 90% of your embroidery. The average embroiderer that does corporate logos on shirts, you're going to use this backing.
yeah, and again, because of all these different types of materials, if we want to simplify it for the embroidery operator, well, again, I'm going to make life easier. We're going to get magnetic hoop. Makes placement with the jig and just hooping easier. Next thing, do we have to think about all these different? Oh, what's the design? I mean, it's not that hard, but when you're going with this no-show, you're taking a lot of the guesswork out, right? And again, you're using kind of a more premium product, I would say, because again, you're not going to potentially see it. It's not going to be felt. I mean, it's very soft. So I'm glad that you agree that there's no reason not to, because that's what we're doing in our shop. And it's, again, a little bit more expensive, but worth it. And in my opinion,
It really is.
you're going on expensive items. I print a T-shirt. This shirt costs $3. I can't buy a polo for $3, and this is a premium shirt.
Right.
So it's...
Never mind your jackets and things like
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. So are those like your two? So they're two main. Again, we have a lot of different, but the two main would be...
There's another one in, Zach, there's another one in there. Let's talk about the cut performance as well,
Okay.
because it's very similar. Have you ever tried that one?
Cut performance. I don't think so.
Woven?
I'm not the one running a machine anymore. I just,
So it's
Trying to
in the
save it.
performance one, and what it is it's another performance where, so it literally works the same as the Weblon No-Show. It's just a very different stabilizer because it's woven. So the Weblon is still a non-woven. It's just made of nylon, and it's embossed, and it's the way it's created is not like your basic tearaways, cutaways. Yep, there's the black one. So this guy gained popularity probably, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 years ago. Again, once the performance wear shirts started showing up. This one actually has a high weight. It's like 2.7 ounces. And that's because it's fabric. So it's actually a fabric, right? But it works. I tested it side by side with the Weblon, and it works equally as well on both. And you wonder, well, why would I use something that's woven? Is it going to fray? When you go to when you go to cut it around the design, you leave that 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever you feel comfortable leaving. The first couple of times you wash it, it will kind of unravel, but it stops at the design. It's not going to keep unraveling under the design. And it's actually a little bit softer against the skin than the Weblon No-Show. But
is it more expensive typically?
it is, it's fairly the same. It might be a little bit more than the Weblon, but it's not much more, if any.
And I see that this comes in both black and white. So obviously, I really don't want to use a white button-down shirt and use this behind it. I could see it.
Yeah.
But is there really, is there anything wrong with using white on most products? Because I'm not typically going to see it. What's the preference? Why use a dark stabilizer?
So you can use it on your dark shirt. So if you're embroidering on your T-shirt, you could use a black. Do you need to use a black? Absolutely not. Are you going to be showing off the inside of your T-shirt where the embroidery is? No, probably not. So I think embroiderers who have a high sense of wanting to be a little bit above, be more professional and offer something that's maybe a little nicer, would do something like that. The other thing is when you're talking about maybe jackets. So
yeah,
maybe
I can see a jacket being open and being able to see that, and it's typically lined black. That's when it makes a lot of sense to me. Well, it makes some sense, but it's not life or death.
But they do cost more, so it would be, considered a specialty because, everybody uses white. The black, you're going to spend a little bit more on it. But if you want to have that, kind of nicer look for your customer, that's when you would use it. But absolutely, you don't need to. Same thing with white bobbins and black bobbins. Same thing.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to these different types of backing, you really can get it two different ways. You can get it on a big roll, or you can get them in pre-cut squares. Now, I want nothing to do with the roll. I'm not doing full jacket backs and so forth. Are most shops nowadays just going with the pre-cut because it's just easier? I don't have to cut anything.
It really depends on the shop. Sometimes your larger shops will actually do rolls because they have some, not downtime, but they have busy work to do. So I do see that.
It is a little cheaper. It is.
Yep, it's a little less expensive, but it is so much more convenient to just grab and go type thing. But, jacket backs are not as big as they were right now. We're not seeing a lot of that. I love them. I think they're great to do. I have a couple coming up that we're going to be working on. But there are actually some larger pre-cuts. So you got your 15 by 15s. So you can do those on your jacket backs as well. But I think the most efficient way is certainly for the pre-cuts. And it's when you do it by piece, you're talking pennies.
Yeah.
And then like you said earlier, I'd like to reiterate on that, how the embroidery on the garment is such a small piece of what you're producing for your customer.
Yep.
Money wise, when you talk about how many stitches are in the design, how much thread was used, it's pretty minimal. So going with the top quality products, you're going to have less issues. Sometimes you get what you pay for.
What the customer is paying for, there's a lot of things, but they're paying for that decoration service. And that decoration service, when it comes to embroidery, I don't want to say that completely, but it's heavy machine operated. I mean, the machine is laying down every single stitch. I'm not back there doing this. Yes, we have to hoop. Yes, we have to trim. But when you look at the total amount of time it takes to do the job, 90% of it's on the machine. So you have machine time. And embroidery machines aren't cheap. They really aren't. And the more stitches, so the bigger the design, the more detail in the design, the longer it takes to sew. And when you're sewing, needles break, thread becomes, breaks and so forth. So using the right backing can also help the machine not stop as often. Is that correct? Because if I all of a sudden start putting way too much backing on there, needle's not going to have as much fun going through, or I might have the tension break. So is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Ironically, it's people overstabilize. People overstabilize. They use too much backing on it quite often. You can almost, if you walk through a store and you see embroidery, you look inside, almost always they have two pieces of backing. So do they need two pieces, or does it just look better with the two pieces? I think it's the latter. I think that, a lot of people don't do their own digitizing, or they don't do the testing with the digitizing. Digitizing comes into play a lot when it comes to how well something's going to stitch out, and, keeping it in registration, and it looks good when it's done. So digitizing is an element that affects it as well, backing. But people do tend to overstabilize to compensate for poor digitizing. So I think as far as you want to try and use the least amount of backing to have the least amount back there, but enough that it's going to support the design.
I think it's also peace of mind. We just think, I don't want too little, but you may be, working harder or making the machine work harder.
Right. And it works for quite a bit of embroidery. It's fine. You walk through the stores, they look well, they wash and wear well. It's just when you get to those real thin polyester polos and shirts and things like that.
Gosh, and they just keep getting thinner and thinner. Literally this morning, DecoNetwork's catalog manager was working on new products to add to the software, and she was asking me what decoration methods can work on silk. I thought to myself, I've never decorated silk. One, it's so expensive. People don't typically like to put something on it as much.
Right.
Nancy, I told her, you know what? I don't think it can take the heat from a heat press. I don't think it really, once we ran through a conveyor dryer either. I think it could be sewn, right? I don't see any problem with silk. It's so expensive, and you just don't know, like, until you play with that fabric yourself. Because recently we printed leggings with that little bit of spandex. I want nothing to do with spandex ever again. It is not fun. But silk, what backing would I use for silk?
Well, you probably want to use, so silk is very challenging because you're not going to
Very slippery and all that.
Right. And it's so thin. So now you want to talk about what is the limitations of the fabric. So you're not going to put a 50,000 stitch design on it that you could put on a jacket back. You're going to do something very, running stitches, little swirls here and there, but nothing real dense is what you want to use on it. So we have heat away backing that the silk may or may not be able to withstand the heat. Same thing with the heat press. We have wash away. Typically, you don't want to put water on silk.
So you're giving me the answers. I thought, like, when you don't know or you're on the edge, just let somebody else play with it, because it's going to be a challenge. And whenever we do test sews, because you brought it up, anytime we have something digitized, we're going to test sew. I'm not committing a jacket or polo. I'm not. Those are expensive items compared to doing a T-shirt. When it comes to test printing a T-shirt, we'll often commit. Oh, it's Gildan 5000. What's the worst thing is? The customer says no. Well, I'm out $1.75 versus that polo. It just no.
Yeah.
But the test sew, is how you kind of confirm that it's well digitized. But whenever you're test sewing, if you really wanted to get a good you need to be using the same material that you're going to actually be sewing on. Don't sew it on a T-shirt and you're going to go on a polo, because the stitching's going to look different, and it's just not a good test for even yourself to know that it's going to be good. Now, we just talked about the most popular is going to be a cutaway, because most items, that's just what we need to do. Your tearaway, briefly, I mean, what? It almost every time, it's primarily hats. It's funny that you say when you wash it, you don't feel it. But most of the time I use it, I put it on product that's never washed.
Right.
That's just what it is. If I don't have to wash it, I'm not as worried about also the durability, because you look at a washer and dryer, it is, just a very, oh man, I can't even think of the right word. It's abusive to a garment and the stitching, versus a hat. The worst that's going to happen is I'm going to have a sweatband on there. I just don't wash my hats.
Right.
So yeah, sable or tearaway. You see them on totes, things like that as well.
Yeah. So you think about your canvas totes, your even the what do you call those? Like, they're made of recycled, like kind of the bags you get at the grocery store.
Yep.
You can the softer ones, not the plastic ones. But you can't tell me I can't embroider on anything, because I'm going to try it at least once. I have a couple projects coming up new in the crafting kind of side of embroidery, is embroidering on screen. So it's like the window screens, but you buy a nylon one. So that's going in the machine next, and I'm going to embroider on that. So I'm going to learn how to do that. The other thing I did earlier this year was I embroidered on toilet paper. So if you can embroider on toilet paper, you can embroider on anything. It just depends, like you said, what are you going to do with it? Well, the toilet paper is going to go up on the shelf and be a fun conversation piece, right? The screens are just, somebody introduced it recently, so it's just popping up everywhere on Facebook. So, of course, I want to try that as well.
Blame those
silk, I don't know that I would, if I had silk, I would try it.
You'd get a guard of fabric or something. You wouldn't be taking someone. Yes. Yeah, we could do it. Let's just go and throw it on there and go.
Absolutely. But I also have had silk in the past, and I threw it in the washer and the dryer, which, says dry clean only. But I'm like, I'm survival of the fittest when it comes to garments. I didn't spend a lot of money on it. And I'm like, well, it's either going to be destroyed or survive. It survived, actually. If I still had it, I'd bring it in and embroider on it. But yeah, you get those heavy duty, those high priced products. You got to get something that's at least close to the same fabric.
Yeah.
So maybe if I had a silk thing I was going to embroider, I would get a real lightweight satin just to see how it would react. Because it's similar, but you really want, T-shirts, you should be ordering at least a few extra. Not only for your mistakes, but for practicing and just testing.
Yep. And well, it's not hard to go to the thrift store and get some old garments there. The thing about embroidery is it's so small. Now, we make enough mistakes in our shop to have plenty. But that's the thing about embroidery. You screw up one polo, you just now have 20 different places that you can drop a logo. Ours look like a NASCAR uniform.
Of course.
So, kind of speaking of NASCAR, just another type of embroidery that I see getting more and more popular, patches. So, if we're going to make patches, what's the formula there, Nancy?
Of course. Oh, that's great. Because patches are trending so big right now.
They really are.
They are. You can just have so much fun with those, right?
The detail.
So we have a film that is. So let me just start by saying, when it came to patches in the past, and you still have your big patch making, big houses that do the embroidery on those, and they're doing them, by the yard. And, they're using die cuts to cut out the shapes, and they're using marrow machines to put the edges on. And that was just so expensive to invest to do patches that way for the average embroiderer that wanted to make them. Now we have what's called Easy Badge film. That one's not in the bag in your book, but it's in the line of backings. And what it is it's a heat away film, also known as like trick film is something they call it out there, super film. And it's just this 100 micron thick plastic that has some texture to it. Use 2 layers of it, and you can create a badge. You can hoop it by itself. You can embroider right on it. Finish whatever that design is with a satin stitch. That's now your marrow stitch. You pop it out, and there you got a patch. You can take it further and use like a tackle twill material or any applique material for the base. So instead of building it all out of thread, now you can use tackle twill in the shape of whatever patch you're going to make. So not only is it more affordable now, it's also easy to make it with the film itself.
Yeah, that film, the best way I could describe it, because I was in a shop recently doing it, imagine a shower curtain. That clear plastic liner, that's what it looks like they're kind of sewing on. And then for most of those patches, do you think that they're using a laser machine to go around it, or does it create a nice edge when it's sewn properly?
On the badge film, it creates a real nice edge. So you up the density on that satin stitch. The digitizing for this is specific in that the easiest way to put it in layman's terms is that you do a lot of underlapping. So you don't want to be putting the holes in the same spot. So when you're doing your underlay, there's like 3 different layers of underlay if you're doing it all out of thread. And then when it comes time to do the satin stitch, you do your underlay for that. But you want to make sure it's overlapping outside the plastic, into the plastic, but onto the design itself. And it's a real heavy density that you're going to do. So, if you're using like the 0.4, you would probably go down to like a 3, just to get a lot, kind of like your 3D foam when you do that, and the density is kind of heavy. So it gives a nice clean edge. The film itself is heat away, so if you're doing some kind of intricate shapes and there's a little bit left over on the outside, you can just use a heat gun, hair dryer, and it'll kind of melt it, and you can just pull it right off.
Do any of those films have an adhesive backing? Can I then take it over to a hat press and press it? Or is this something that traditionally still has to be sewn?
So the film itself is just for the sewing and the embroidery part to create it. So what you're talking about is more of a heat seal. So that's something that you do buy separately, and you apply it to the back of it. And you can either give it to your customers that way so that they can adhere it, or you adhere it yourself on the hats or jackets, backs, or whatever. I think the best thing about it is that, when you think about blank patches and things like that, you've got rectangles, you get circles, you got ovals, very kind of plain. With this, you can do any shape you want.
And yeah, you can. I'll tell you, patches are something that is now like a promo product or a giveaway. I mean, just it's cool. Like, it's common now to just, hey, here's a patch. So we talked about cutaway, tear away, fade away, somewhat wash away. Let's talk about combining a couple of these because, like you said, you can take a cutaway and a tear away and bring them together, but you better make sure that wash. Yes, the tear away is on the bottom. Yes. Tear away always needs to be on the bottom, otherwise you're going to have problems. So is that essentially just the one rule? Don't put tear away, on top, however you want to call top to bottom.
Next to the garment or sandwiching it in between. I mean, if you do that, it simply just makes it a little harder to tear away because you want to be able to tear as much away as you can and then trim your cutaway. If it goes in the middle or you do it backwards, because we always do mistakes, right? Mistakes happen. It's not the end of the world. Every time you wash it, even if it's sandwiched in between, it's just going to get a little softer and feel a little better. That's why I like a medium or a lightweight. So I don't like that real heavy 2 ounce or 1.8 ounce tearaways. Use a medium or a lightweight, and that way it's kind of gone.
And if you use two different types of backing or even just two of the same, do you like changing the angle at all to get a different type of weave versus just the same way both times?
So a lot of people do that. The only one it really makes a difference with is if it's a woven backing, like the Easy Cut Performance backing. So when you think about your non-wovens, there's really no direction to them. So if you were to put one this way and one at 45, you're not gaining any stability with that because it's non-woven, meaning there's no directions to it. But if you look at the Cut Performance, you've got threads going horizontal, you got threads going vertical. If you put those at 45 degrees, now you have 4 directions, because here you have 2 directions where the threads are going, and that second one is going to put it at a different angle, right? So now you got a lot more stability with the Cut Performance. It doesn't hurt anything by putting it at a 45 degree, but that's a common thing that people do.
So, I think most of our viewers for this episode are probably newer to embroidery or thinking about doing it. And again, what I have always found, just not only confusing but overwhelming is just all these different types. So, if we wanted to greatly simplify it, if you wanted to make embroidery easier for somebody, you have a tearaway weight, because you can always just double them up. I'd rather go with a little bit less weight tearaway. And I always, we talked about pre-cut, get the hat pre-cut, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to use the tearaway on that. So we always have a stack of that. We do have a stack of the basic. It's not what we prefer to use as much. And again, we go with more of that 2 ounce or 1.5 ounce and have that. But then I can't state enough, guys, the no-show. I also think, Nancy, over time, the consumers in the market will tell you what they want, what they don't want. With DTF, that's what this is. Everybody was initially worried about the hand, the feel of it, because it would feel a little plasticky. Yeah, but then you know what we realized as an industry is the customer actually doesn't care that much about that. They just love that the print looks perfect. And not everybody's the same way. So if you are doing high-end fashion retail, you need every type and know when to use them. But if you really want to simplify it a little bit, get yourself a basic, the no-show, tear away for hats. You can do most jobs that way, right, Nancy? Is that fair?
Absolutely. The only thing I would add is a lightweight or medium weight tearaway in your pre-cuts or a roll. The tearaway for the cap is usually 2.5 to 3 ounce, so it's a real heavy weight, right? And you need that because now you're not embroidering on a flat, now you're embroidering on something round, right? So that heavyweight tearaway is what helps you embroider that well. When it comes to flats, I would have a 1.5 ounce tearaway as well. Add that under your weblon to get a little better hooping. It also, I believe, it gives a nice flat sandwich to embroider on with your fabric as well, and helps it look good from the get-go. That tearaway is not going to do anything once you wash it, dry it a couple of times, but it's going to just give a better sandwich. I don't know how to better say that.
Stabilizes it. I mean, it
does. It adds stabilizing during the embroidery. I always say that about tearaway. Tearaway stabilizes during the embroidery process.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. That's I'm really glad you brought that up, Nancy, because that's what we really are doing. We want a good sew, but then it doesn't do us any good if it looks good, and after the first time it's washed, it doesn't. So, now speaking of this, the tearaway, you have a lot of different types of hats. You have your dad hat. Your unstructured cotton is essentially your dad hat. And then you have these Richardson 112s. Can we make them thicker? Jeez. So does every type of hat need backing?
Yes, absolutely. And there's a reason for that. And I'm going to extend that to all embroidery. All embroidery should have some backing behind it.
Stable.
You could have something flimsy back there, but it helps with the hooping. It helps during the embroidery, but it's also helps
going over that arm too, and it becomes a smoother surface, right?
Right. But even with the flat embroidery, it slides on the needle plate. The arm.
Yep.
That material is going to keep it flowing nice and during all the ways that the machine moves. When it comes to caps and going to those Richardson 112s, any hat, especially those, it's all in the hooping. And one thing, you got to have your backing back there because that gives it that smooth motion. You have seams inside hats that, could kind of catch on the side of the needle arm and things like that as it's sewing. And that's going to skew things, and the registration's not going to look good. But not only you want to use backing, I throw a second piece in almost all the time, because the trick to getting caps to embroider well is to get that material flat down as close as you can get to the needle plate so it's not bouncing, right? So when the needle goes through it, and if it's too far up, the needle, before it penetrates, it goes sideways, and that's where you hit the side of the needle hole and your needles break. And that's why, because you don't have that material flat enough. So when it comes to the Richardsons, I say steam them, get them nice and malleable. Hopefully, I haven't seen a hoop cap frame, but you got those arms on the bottom of your hoops with the binder clips. You want to use those. You want to use them on the unstructured ones.
I remember when I first got my machine, it's like, binder clips? Really? No. And one of my employees just got married, and the other one was feeding the machine, but then he was sometimes busy, so I hooped some stuff for the first time in years this past week, and a couple dad hats, forgot the binder clip. It was like, dang it. And you also brought up a great point, though, because when you go to hoop a Richardson 112, and it's real structured, but then you do that dad hat, there's different thicknesses there, and on the side of a hoop, you often see those little screws to adjust. Yes. And very important. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more variables that go into embroidery that I overlooked, because before I bought my own equipment, I kind of shared a space with another print shop, and they did all this. They did embroidery, and I did the printing, and I would outsource the jobs to them, and I always looked at it just because I was looking across the room. You just set it and forget it, and you call it a day. No, you need to be using the right stabilizer. You need to be using the digitizing. Huge. I mean, we're talking about the Richardson 112. A good digitizer doesn't, you sew from the middle out with a hat, but a good digitizer doesn't start in the very middle, because you're going to go directly into the thickest seam possible, and then it's going to throw everything else off. So everything works in conjunction, and if you're working with a good digitizer, you're telling them, I'm using the Polyneon 40 for this. I might be using the 60 weight for this because it has smaller text and so forth. I'm using this backing. The more the more you tell the digitizer what you're doing, the better it's going to come out. And I have to think 95%, not even 98% of shops outsource digitizing. And we're all hit up every day. I could do digitizing. I can do it. And you get what you pay for when it comes to digitizing. You definitely get what you pay for.
Don't buy them from the dollar store.
No. And so we've been talking about backing, which is the go-to stabilizer. But now I really want to talk about topping before we call it a day. Because topping is something we've started to use more in our shop. And we primarily use it on those crazy thin polos that are essentially a t-shirt with a collar, because the cheapest polos, I mean, are typically that way, but even expensive polos. And we've also seen that, like, if we're going an Adidas polo and it's $35, we're going to try to just really protect it. So talk to us about, what exactly is topping? When should we be using it? And has it gained popularity over the past, decade?
I would say it's definitely gained popularity because of the polyester performance wear garments, for sure. It's interesting that you started on that end of the spectrum, because topping was originally planned for your real fluffy materials. So if you think about your terry cloth, your fleece, and
beanie hooks, we like to use them on beanies to give that extra.
Yes,
it's such a loose
so the
knit.
heavy knits. Yep. So that keeps your thread on top. So you sandwich that when you hoop it, or I tend to just lay it on top and use a little tape. But you can use it either way, but it keeps your thread stitches on top as opposed to sinking down into those real fluffy materials. So that's the original, and still today, you want to use that with those types of fabrics, and you get a much cleaner and nicer looking design with that. But on the other hand, when you get to those thin, stretchy materials, you're saying, well, why do I need it there? It's because the material is just simply so unstable. People love the way it fits on your body. It flows, it drapes really well. It looks really good. But because of that, that's what makes it unstable. So by adding the topping on that type of a material, you're going to improve the crispness. I mean, you could use topping on almost anything, and it would probably give a little bit of an edge to it. But anything in between there, I guess I would say, is not as necessary to use it. But it does give you more crisp letters. So we're talking about a lot of corporate logos here. A lot of times they have the corporate slogan underneath there. So now tiny letters, for sure. You're going to digitize for the small letters. You're going to use the 60 weight. Add that topping as well.
And that other needle. Yeah, that's one thing that took us forever to really figure out was, you know what? If we've got white in this part of the design, and then underneath it we have that real thin text, one, the digitizer should keep them separate so that I can do this portion with the 40 weight and a bigger needle. And this, I want to use a smaller needle with the 60 weight. And again, like you said, we found that it really did help when we used the topping. It sounds like there's no drawback really from using the topping, and the topping is water soluble. So
it is. And actually,
yeah, go ahead.
Yep, and that's a good point, because there really isn't there's no restrictions to it unless the fabric can't take the water. But we have a heat activated topping as well. So if you don't want to get it wet, like maybe it's a velvet or velveteen or something like that, and you don't want to put water on it, you could use the heat away for that.
I don't want to play with
lightweight, and it's a topping.
Yeah, so again, highly suggest have some topping in the shop. You don't want it to dry out though. It needs to keep a little bit, but we have a steamer, and we found that to be great tool. So, and sometimes you learn that in the test cell. If you're doing the test cell, it's like, I think that could be better. I bet, again, when it comes to that very fine text, that's my kryptonite at times. It's getting several variables right needle, right thread, but the topping can definitely help you there. And also, again, other variables, machine speed. Don't be running that thing so fast. It doesn't matter if you use all the right backing. You need to respect the chemistry, if there is any, behind embroidery. And embroidery is never going to go anywhere. I bring up DTF ate into screen printing. I mean, every decoration process is the time and place. The great thing about embroidery is customer knows what embroidery is. They don't, when it comes to printing, they have no clue what any of these different processes are typically. But embroidery, They do. And it's very much so a B2B type of, thing. I'm not doing a bunch of embroidery so much one-off for just consumers. Hey, I want a birthday gift or something. No, we print that. So again, you're typically going on higher end quality products. You're dealing with businesses who are typically more clientele. You really want to go above and beyond delivering that quality. And again, using the right type of backing based on the material that's being sewn, the artwork that is being provided, and the the little intricacies in the design, all what determine what the strategy should be. Nancy, where can our audience learn more about Madeira's products and buy some of this stuff?
Sure. So at MadeiraUSA.com, you will find a plethora of supplies to order for sure, including all the easy backings and toppings that we just talked about. More importantly, I would like to encourage you to visit the education page as well, because not only are you going to learn stuff about this, there's all kinds of techniques, products, and information that was there. Brand new page and just filled with tons of information.
I'll tell you, this is the hardest decoration process to outsource. It's easy for me to find screen printers. It's hard to find embroiderers who will contract decorate and so forth. So it is a process that I see brought in-house quite often just for that control. It has its own learning curve. It has its own variables. Use the resources out there. And again, anybody who's getting new into embroidery, Madeira really is a huge pillar in this decoration process, more than any supplier for any other process. When I go to a trade show, I mean, you have Madeira and you kind of have Isacord. And again, based on my 1,000+ conversations with DecoNetwork users across the entire world, 90% are using Madeira thread and backing and so forth. So you guys really are the benchmark when it comes to this. Thank you so much, Nancy, for joining us today. I learned more every time we talk, and now we just actually have to implement it. That's the important thing, right, is to implement what you learn. Everyone, check out MadeiraUSA.com, right?
That's correct.
All right. And Nancy, again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to doing it again in the future.
Thank you, Zach. Same thing here.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.